So what I was just talking to Jordan about real quick there, we were just talking about after class the other day, just about some other just random game stuff here and there. But one of the things I've joined in or kind of like stumbled upon was this thing called, well, here, let me just show it. Sorry, I have way too many windows open right now. The content for today's class is going to go really fast. So that's why I'm like I don't have a problem going this. Okay. Sorry, I need to share my screen. Sound. Let's see if I can find it real quick. It was. Let's just go to my main feed. I'll just pull it up real quick. Basically, I'm trying to find it in my feed. So oh, there it is. Okay, so there's this group called Unreal Engine Virtual Production on Facebook. They're probably on like other spaces too, but I just stumbled upon this on one day and I just joined it, and it's insane. If you want to like kind of see what's happening in the world of like virtual production, let's see if I can make this a little bigger. Basically they show like, so like right here, this guy, he's sitting at this desk right there, and this is all done in Unreal. So it's a virtual production. So you can see the green screen because he's kind of greenish, but it still looks pretty stinking good, right? Like it looks like, I mean, it's relatively convincing. So what they're able to do now, and so they're basically, what's happening is people are starting to use Unreal for real-time like filming and stuff, and this is all stuff that used to take really, really expensive and difficult post-production software and techniques to do it. Now they're able to do this, and I mean, if you look closely, this one does have kind of a greenish tint to this guy, but if you were doing this for a quick shots for a TV commercial, like that is, look, I mean, you spend a lot on the camera rigs and everything, but and some of the lighting, but it's a green screen in a box. You don't have to actually create set. You can create the set and you can change the set on location or even in post. His feet look like they're floating a little bit there. That's a little fake, but oh wait, because he's got him on the bar there. But it's wild what people are able to do. Oh, this person's using modular synth or like Eurorack to control Unreal, which is pretty cool. Like they're controlling the sun. That's kind of neat one. This one's talking about like how they got contract for Fox News, so this is all done in Unreal during the election stuff. But like what the modern thing that they're doing now is these giant LED screens right here, and what they do is this is all done. All the giant LED screens are synced up to Unreal, and Unreal knows where the camera position is. So when the camera moves around, it's aware and it changes the perspective of the video on there so it looks true. And it's insane how like realistic some of this stuff looks. But if you haven't looked at like join this Unreal Engine virtual production, I don't know, it's blowing my mind what's happening out there. And it doesn't have much to do with audio, but it's just part of the whole scene of what's going on in this world. And it's like they post a lot. Like this stuff has like so much going through. Sometimes they'll show like the behind the scenes on how they do this stuff. It's like really cool. Like what was this one? They'll take stuff like mapping. They're doing a lot of XR. You know, a lot of the DJ sets are done. Actually, maybe this might be it right here. They're doing a lot of DJ sets like XR type stuff. Yeah, like this kind of thing. Where they're like real people in virtual worlds. You know, that's just kind of a thing right now. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff happening. But anyway, if you're just any inclined, these are the screens I'm talking about. So these screens are getting like massive, and I mean they're expensive, but it's way cheaper to do this on a scene like this than it is to go on location, and you have to deal with, I don't know, permits and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty cool what the state of the industry is right now. So like this person, he put himself into a monkey outfit and he's walking around. He's doing real-time motion capture type stuff. Anyway, I encourage you to take a look at this because it's like mind-blowing what's happening in terms of the real-time video production right here. So this is like just a production testing. So oh, this one's funny. Watch this guy as a DJ. He's not even a DJ. He's just pretending to be a DJ. So like So he's just pretend turning knobs that don't even exist. I thought that was really funny. So, um, but what you can actually do now is you can actually, like, they have these things where you have like fake cameras, and so you can actually use your iPhone as a virtual camera in Unity, and it's just wild. So anyway, just thought I'd throw it out there because there's some neat stuff happening there in that world. Um, Let me close out my windows. We're gonna redo all this stuff today. Should have printed this out. Hopefully I don't need that. I forgot to print out my notes for today. Okay. So, a couple things also before we get going in terms of what kind of the roadmap here. So I just posted, actually, let me go to Canvas here for a minute. And let's take a look. I just finally, I'm sorry, I didn't get this posted until now, but basically I've got the assignment posted here. And so what's going to be due is it's going to be due by Friday night by midnight. It's the, oh, I didn't make it live. It's now live. So basically, this is the FMOD Unity integration. What I'm asking you to do is to add sounds to the Viking Village. So I've got the Viking Village tutorials here. So it's just the same ones that are just posted over there. You can blast through these. This, if you haven't done this already, I mean, these should go pretty fast. This whole assignment, it takes a little bit, but it's pretty easy. You should be able to do this all in one sitting if you wanted to. So it would be better to break it up into a couple sittings, but you can sit down and crank on this thing pretty much in one fell swoop. And what I'm asking you to do is I want you to replace the torch sounds, the ambient pub sounds from some of the buildings, creating structure from one of the cranes, and then add a music track. You don't have to go, like I said, you're implement sounds yourself done in all the videos except for the footsteps. We're not doing the footstep stuff. The footstep stuff is broken, and I've not been able to figure that one out yet. I wish I could, because I really want to get that one working. That one's important. And then for the music, you can just do a basic stereo track. You can use anything. If you want to use some like some ambient track that you have laying around or whatever you've got, it's fine. Just have it so it loops. So there's just some music in there. Just so I want you to get comfortable with doing the music implementation. You don't need to go through and do all the complex triggering and stuff. If you want to, go for it. It's awesome. But we're going to save that for next semester, doing more of the complex music stuff. Feel free to add more sounds if you like, but that's the bare minimum right there. So just these four things essentially what you need. So you're going to submit the FMOD project as a zip file, just the entire zip, which contains the banks inside of it. So that basically, if we were to drop it in, all you have to do is drop in Unity, just remap to the different project folder, and it should, well, it's not quite that simple, but it should mostly remap the banks. I'd have to remap the sounds, but that's what, with only 4 of these, that's pretty easy to do. Yeah, so that's gonna be due on Friday night by midnight. Any questions on that? Cool. All right. So going forward, like kind of the roadmap for today. The end of the semester is kind of sneaking up on me pretty quick here. I didn't get as far as I wanted to. Like I spent way too much on the 301 stuff, so I apologize for going a little long on that one. It was important, and that stuff is really important. As we get into doing like real projects, this is like, even though it was kind of a slog, that's the really important information that you'll need to have going forward. So unfortunately, what that is, that kind of shaved off a lot of the stuff I want to spend with Unreal. So we're going to spend next week on Unreal, and we're going to do a little bit with Unreal, implementation or integration on after the break. But basically after the break, what I want to do is spend that time working on final project stuff. So I'll get the final project parts written, but basically for the final project, your job is going to be building out a scene, just basically, and most likely Unity. You can use Unreal, but we're not having enough time with it. But using Unity, that basically you're going to walk around and it's just going to show how you implement a few sound effects, and you're going to create basically a web-based game, so that as a portfolio piece, you can go, okay, if somebody goes, hey, you can be like, I've done game audio. Like it'll come up in conversation, be at some party or something like that, or some Zoom party these days, and somebody's gonna be like, you'll be like, oh yeah, I've done some game audio, and everyone's like, oh really? Like, what have you done? And then you can just pull up your website. So the idea is that we'll walk through the process of how to post games to WebGL. And that's how you're going to submit your final project. It's going to be through WebGL. I suppose you don't have to do WebGL, but WebGL is good because it's actually like, it's an easy way to implement portfolio work, and that you can show off what you've got going on. So pretty cool. So that's kind of what's going to happen. So the reason I'm saying this is because I didn't want to, I wanted to go deeper with some of this FMOD stuff, but we just don't really have the time. So we're going to call it here. And what I'm going to do is, should you decide to do this, especially when you get into Real, we're going to pick up in Game Audio 2, focusing a lot more starting off the semester with Unreal, and then also, probably not as much FMOD, but mostly we're going to spend the first part of the semester talking about Unreal, probably in as detailed as we did with Unity this semester, and just so you have kind of a grip on that. And also because that's what we're going to be using for the projects that we're combining with the DAC people. So anyway, that's just a little pitch that we've got going for Game Audio 2. I also, and I didn't mention it, I mentioned this in my critical listening classes if you're in any of those classes, but I also just made live another class called Multimodal Interaction for Music. So we needed some more electives. If you're in need of some more electives, I would, if you're looking for electives for registration for next semester, if you're in this class and it kind of speaks to you a little bit, I would encourage you to take Game Audio 2, just because that's where I think it's gonna be much more project based, and we're gonna be basically doing like 3 or 4 big projects throughout the semester, and with a smattering of new content, but it's gonna be mostly the kind of the project based stuff. And so if you like this Game Audio stuff like at all, I would recommend that you take Game Audio 2. But if you're like, I'm done, I don't want to do Game Audio anymore, that's totally cool. Or you're like, I want to do Game Audio and some of the kind of electives that are happening next semester are well, we've got surround, which I was normally teaching, and normally I teach surround sound. That's kind of my jam. Like, I work in spatial audio, but this semester, or this upcoming semester, I'm chock full. I don't have enough. I have too many classes, so I am switching and I'm taking multimodal interaction for music. And this is a class that I've taught. I developed about 5 years ago, and I ran it like 3 times 5 years ago. 3 years in a row. And then the last 2 years I've taken off from it because it was a collaboration with Inworks, and not that our relationship has broken or anything like that. It's just that they kind of went a different direction than the way Cam was going. So it was a collaborative class, and we stopped kind of doing it. So I'm bringing it back, and it's a pretty badass class. It's going to be about, it's interface design. So basically we're going to make MIDI instruments and software instruments. It's going to basically be a Max class. So we're going to use Max MSP, and we're going to use that to control our DAWs, things like Ableton or Cubase or whatever, Logic or even Pro Tools. But then even further, we're going to start adding Arduinos into the mix, and we're going to start doing like things like adding sensors and adding controllers. So if you want to create your own like game controller style thing for Ableton, you can. Or maybe you want to have like your ambient set be controlled by temperature or lighting conditions or something like that. Basically, we're going to create your own interfaces to your workstations, so that basically you can, I don't know, just make cool, weird, and interesting stuff. So about half the class is going to be on Max MSP as the programming language, because that's going to set the foundation for talking to everything. So we'll use generative software to create our controller software. And we're also looking at making sounds within Max itself. And then the second half of the semester is going to be about hardware integration. So doing things like it's called physical computing, basically how we integrate, how do we talk as analog beings? How do me with my analog hands here talk to the digital software that happens behind the screen? And I've said this before if you saw my other previous talks, but this is a really, really, really shitty interface for making music. Keyboards and mice are not a good way to create music. So that's what we're going to be doing in that class. It's like, how do we make things more expressive, more connected, more unique, more novel, more engaging, and more fun to create music on digital systems? So that's what that class is going to be about. So if you have any questions on that, like, hit me up. But it just finally went live and alive yesterday, so it shows up. It's called Multimodal Interaction for Music. Multimodal means natural means of human communication. So like when I'm talking like this, I'm using my hands as a mode of communication. So multimodal means multi modes of communication to something. And so that's what we're gonna be looking at. So it's a mouthful. I don't love the name. I'm gonna change the name next year probably, but it's still, the content is pretty badass. It's a cool class, so it should be fun. So anyway, and we're gonna also be looking at like MIDI hardware and stuff. So I have a bunch of launch pads, and we have some like leap motions, and we have all sorts of like crazy interface stuff that we can play with. So that's what we're gonna be doing next semester.
Hey Merkel, quick question.
Yeah.
Are you guys gonna touch up on like Imogen Heap's crazy little like glove thing that she uses, or?
Yeah. We can, yes, we can talk about a lot of that stuff. So I think I know which one you're talking about. I think is that the Mimu glove?
I don't even know at this point. I think she's evolved it to like version 20 or some shit. She's gotten crazy with it, so.
So there's this thing called Mimu, which these are some friends of ours that make these things. She's a NASA engineer who decided to break out, and she was also a composer. Kelly, I think was her last name, but it's pretty cool. And basically, you can map these things out. And my friends use these things, and they're so good at it. But I think even like was it Grimes who's using this, or oh yeah, Imogen Heap right there. Yep. So she's um these are the things that she uses right there. So Kelly's the developer here. She's the one who designed this thing, and that's who I've worked with in the past. It's pretty cool. But yeah, she comes to town quite a bit, and my friend Monica, who actually is going to be teaching with us next semester, has a couple of these things and uses them all the time. They're pretty cool. So and like once you get the hang of it, like it uses machine learning, that it's really expressive. It's pretty neat. So yeah, I'll see if maybe I can pick up a couple of these. Maybe they'll send me some out. We could like, play with those. I think they cost like ridiculous amounts of money. Yeah, they're pretty expensive. 2,500 pounds. But yeah, well, we can certainly take a look at that. And actually, my friend Monica, maybe I'll have her guest speak because she has some, and we can just have her come in and demonstrate these things. They're more fun to actually play with, but the thing is, like, it's crazy though. They are kind of like tuned to you because they have machine learning in them, and so you can't just like loan them to people because otherwise it doesn't work as well. So, but yeah, we will take a look at that. Cool. Yeah, so hit me up if you have any questions on any of that, like as we get going. Okay, so what we're gonna do today, in light of like kind of this like trying to move things along, I wanted to go get deeper. There's a lot deeper we can go with FMOD, and most of it comes down to scripting. And so we have to get better at scripting to be able to really control FMOD. I mean, I think we got to get the basic gist on how to do layouts and structures of like events, banks, and adding sound effects. And there's some details and actually some stuff that I didn't quite go into. Well, actually, let's just pull it up. We're going to be using this today. So let's create a new project today. I'm going to do it in 2.0 just because in case we want to integrate this thing. So let's create a new project. But if I create a new event, like just a 3D event, one of the things I didn't talk about was the scatter instrument right here. So scatter instrument's pretty badass. And it's basically what it does is instead of just like this is the thing that I was like missing with the other stuff. So I could set up, if I wanted to set up a random sound effects and random sound generator, maybe you have something like in the video, he's like a wolf and a hawk sound like in the distance, but maybe you want the ability to randomize when things happen. So one of the things that I found frustrating is if let's add an audio track. If I add a multi-instrument right here, and if I add a bunch of sounds in there, what I can't do is just add silence. And that's one of the things I can do in Wise is you can add a bunch of silence so that basically it's going to be hitting silence most of the time. And then every once in a while, it'll trigger a sound. Well, that was kind of annoying that you can't, like when I have a bunch of sounds in here. So if I add whatever, add some, oh, and actually what I didn't show here too is also you can add instruments inside of instruments. So you can add multi-instrument inside of a multi-instrument. So it allows you to do like nested triggering. So if I wanted to shuffle and I had a multi-instrument here, this would be really cool for some stuff like dialogue. If you want to have multiple different trigger conditions and different dialogues happening all the time, but yeah, you want it to play in order to some extent, but randomize certain sections of it. So I could say I want this to play in order, or I guess I could also just put those in order this way, but there's multiple ways you can set this up, but you can actually nest instruments inside of instruments. But when you have a bunch of stuff in here, what you don't have is the ability to do is silence, which is really annoying. And I believe you have the ability here to say probability of on, chance of, and saying how much you want this thing to actually be playing. But I haven't really been able to get that thing to work the way I wanted it to. So I guess what I'm saying, my frustration was that there was these conditions that I was trying to set up some more randomization stuff that this was very difficult to do with it. But with a scatter instrument, you can actually do this, and it's really cool. So you can basically you can randomize both you can randomize anything, but it's basically where it comes from. So you can randomize the scatter distance and then also the spawn interval. So how often it happens and how far away. So if you want to have things like maybe you're in a cave and you want to have like spider noises or creepy, like maybe it's a creepy game would be a really good example for this. You want to add little creaks and pops and like spooky sounds that happen every once in a while. This would be a really good a case to do this, where you want something to come over here randomly, come over here, pop over here, pop over here. And every once in a while, it just things kind of randomly show up. And so you can set your interval. And so this is a really cool way of being able to do that. And there's some pretty complex behavior you can set up with this. I was watching a video and some guy was actually, he uses this for his sound design. What he'll do is, because you can't do this with a DAW, what he does is he uses this as his DAW to create the sound effects. So he'll create a bunch of events over here, like a library of events. Actually, this was in the Celeste video or the Celeste tutorial. Because that's where it was from. Basically, he wanted these sounds of like pages turning. And what he would do is he would set this up and he would have the random pages turning of a book. So that it was like sounded like these books flying all over the place. And what he would do is he would just set that in there and he records the output back into his DAW because he can, and he'd just do it like 20 times because it was random every single time. And he found a random one that he liked and he was able to create this rich soundscape in about 5 minutes instead of doing like automation in Pro Tools and really complex stuff. You can actually, because doing randomization type stuff is, I mean, you can do some randomization stuff in your DAW, but it's not like like this. And so this would be a really, so he's using this as his DAW. So he creates this, the original sound effects in his DAW, brings them into here, morphs them, records the output back over to his DAW, and then brings them in as a single sound effect. So you don't have to run like with 400 different sounds in there. So it's pretty clever. But anyway, the scatter instrument is pretty badass. So yeah, we have that ability to us. So what I want to do today, though, is instead of going deeper and deeper and deeper into the scripting, and because that's just a rabbit hole, and there's a lot more complex stuff that we need to do that we kind of glossed over, the things like the trigger conditions and some of that. But I think we just don't have time for it right now. So we'll pick back up on this next semester a little bit. But for right now, what I wanted to do was just as a kind of a short thing is go through the like look at how to integrate Reaper with this, because I thought that was a really kind of clever thing, was how to, like, that's one of the things I really like about working with Nuendo is that the tight integration that it has with Wise. So when you're actually building these things out, and we haven't gone through this process really from beginning to end that much, but when you're building out and working with a real game, starts to get really complex. You get a lot of sounds and events, and it just the management from the sound design all the way to the game implementation, it becomes very tedious. There's a lot of things like file name management is a really big deal. So if you go through and you create something like 5 different footsteps and you call them footstep 1, footstep 2, footstep 3, and you implement them into the game, and or you export those, takes you a while to export those, import those into Wise, and then play the game. And then you're like, oh wait, we actually have 2 different kinds of footsteps. We have footsteps on dirt and footsteps on water or snow. We'll say dirt and snow. Then you're going to go back. Okay, so it's instead of footstep 1, it's going to be footstep snow 1, footstep snow 2, and then all of a sudden it breaks the entire link all the way through. And so your file name management is a really important and really big pain in the ass. You have to be very careful as the game gets bigger and bigger and bigger, that your naming structure is extremely precise, and it's tedious because unlike when you're working with, say, a normal DAW, when you're working with 2 or 3, because you're going to be working, say, we'll say we're working with Ableton, and then we're going to be working in Wise, and then we're going to be working in Unity, that we have those 3 different systems working together. We usually, as in music, we work in one system and we call it good. But here we have to have like communication between 3 different systems that all agree on the same naming convention all the way through, and that can be very complicated. So you have to be extremely careful with this. So there's a lot of effort being put into how to streamline this process, and that's one of the things that I want to look at today. I love the Nuendo process. I think it's really cool. There's a lot more that we can do that I didn't go into with it because I don't think anybody here uses it, so I didn't want to push it too hard. But there's some really badass connection things you can do between that. But with FMOD, but so it turns out, so Wise is kind of sided with Nuendo, but then FMOD is kind of sided with Reaper. And as we've talked about before, and even looked at the beginning of the semester, Reaper is heavily used in the game audio industry for a lot of reasons, and particularly because of the scripting capabilities that it can do. Well, there's a lot of things that it can do that are pretty neat. So what I want to look at today is how to actually look at this workflow through this, and hopefully convince you to consider looking at using Reaper as one of your DAWs. Let me, I can leave that. Let's leave this up here. I want to get rid of, I got to clean things up here because I was doing some practice stuff with it. I want to make sure that I'm not going to be overlapping on stuff. Cool. I guess I don't need that. So let's start with Reaper. So, well, actually, I already have FMOD pulled up here. So I'm going to start with FMOD. And I'm just going to create a session, save it so that it's called, let's do this on desktop. I'm just going to call the session Reaper. Actually, yeah, Reaper. There, cool. So here's my FMOD session right here. It's got my metadata, and then once I start adding assets in there, it's going to start populating this. So we're just going to call our session for the day in our game session Reaper. So let's go over to Reaper and actually get to work on this thing. I know. I don't actually own Reaper. I think I'm going to buy it. My problem is I'm trying to learn like 10 different things of software right now. So it's like, it's hard to justify buying something, but I'm going to save this one. I'm just going to save this on desktop. We call this one Reaper. Just like I should come like, I'm gonna change the name of this. Let's call this one, we'll call it Boom. We're gonna call this session Boom. I'd change the name of this thing. Okay, so where did it put? Boom. Ah, shoot. Sorry, I'm gonna redo this. I don't like how I set all this stuff up. Let's go back in here. Let's close this out. Let's create a new FMOD session, and let's call it. I'm just gonna call the session Boom for the day. New project. Save it. Desktop. Boom. Capital B. Got my Boom session there. Now let's go over to Reaper. Whoops, not that. I know. So let's save this as, actually, I want to show you a couple things that are, well, that's a little bit weird. Under your preferences here, one of the things that's cool about Reaper is how incredibly flexible it is. And that's why I think it's also like people like to use it, because it's incredibly flexible. So depending on whether you're working in music or film or video games or whatever your sound design or something like that, you can set Reaper up to work around your needs that in a way that pretty much no other DAW can. You can customize it and tune it to your workflow. But under project settings right here, one of the things that it doesn't do by default, under media, which is kind of weird. Like normally when we create, say, a Pro Tool session or an Ableton session, you create it, well, like, let me see. Just pull up, like, do I have a session drive? I don't have much on here. This is my Windows machine. I don't do audio production on this machine, so I don't have all my sessions on here. This is my gaming machine. When you work in, say, Ableton or like well, actually, let's do it with Ableton real quick. Did you guys see the Ableton 11 announcement?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, like
You have to buy it this time.
What excites you the most?
I think the first thing that caught my eye was the like kind of playlist recording type thing. It's a lot like Pro Tools, which like
Yeah.
I've got a template in Ableton that like kind of mimics that, where I'll like save things while I'm recording, but that'll make it a lot easier.
Yeah, there's some so I guess I can say it now, but yeah, so I got to play with it like a couple weeks ago. They gave me like an inside discussion, so I got to sit down and play with it. Or like actually, I have the beta, so I can play with it, and so it's pretty rad. So, but what excites me is like some of the generative stuff that they've done. They've done a lot with like making it so you can explore if you get stuck in a rut. Okay, so anyway, this is a crappy session. Let's just save it. To desktop. So when we save it, and let me consolidate the tracks. Well, okay, no, this is going down the road I don't really want to talk about. But basically, when we have our session set up, you have inside your project, you'll have like samples, and you have your folder. By default, what's annoying with Reaper is it puts everything in the same folder. Like everything is in there. And so it doesn't actually, so like it doesn't differentiate between like your used files, your rendered files. It's just one gigantic folder, which is kind of annoying. So what I'm going to do, and they call it just media, because you can call it audio if you wanted to. So like if you call it audio, um, this would, like, I just created in under my media here, I create a thing called media folders, and so when I say okay, basically what that's going to do is when I say Control S and I save this one, boom, Reaper. That when it saves it over here, when it pops up in a second. Ah, shoot, I didn't create a folder. I hate it when it does that. So I'm going to go through and create a subfolder for this one right here. You can actually have it do that for you too. But it created a media folder right here. So let's go back in and open that up. And let's get to work here. So back over in FMOD. So what I want to have happen here, there's two ways we can actually have FMOD talk to Reaper. One of them is we can have it so it links all of your events, and so that all the exported sound effects from here show up in in FMOD as sound effects, and so that if I change something here and re-export it, it updates it inside of Reaper, which is massive. The other one you can do is you can create complex timelines here, and you can actually move this entire timeline over into FMOD and have your timelines sync between the two of these. So we'll take a look at those both situations here pretty quickly. So let's look at the first case. So what I'm going to do here is yeah, so let's just start over in FMOD and talk about how we sync the two of these things up. So starting with, I think it's 2.0 is where this feature came about. Under our preferences, if we go under DAW over at the end right here, you have the ability to say, here's a Reaper application path. So this is my Reaper. So I don't need to change that unless you have like multiple installs or put Reaper on a different place. Don't need to do Reaper projects folder. This is optional. I wouldn't select that. And so all we need to do is just make sure that that's good to go and that that's set up as it should be. So what I want to do now is then basically over in here, all I need to do is so I've got my Boom Reaper session, and I can just drag that into, oops, not here, into my assets. So I can do that from my window, my assets window here, or I can do it from my audio bin, same difference. So I can just drag this in right there, and it links the two of these up, which is pretty cool. Now, what it's going to say is like rendered assets path here. And so basically when you export out of Reaper or whatever DAW you would normally use, but we'll just use Reaper. As you export Reaper, a lot of times you'll either have something, a folder called bounces or renders or something like that. I've always called them renders just because that's how we've done it forever, but a lot of people call them bounces just because you bounce out of there. So over in Reaper, what we need to do is we need to let's actually create a quick little session. So let's go through and build out kind of a session, because there's a couple things that I think are worth looking at here. And then we'll come back to this and look at how this integrates. So we'll sidestep and build a quick audio session here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create some audio tracks. I'm gonna call this one crash. Boom, bang. And if I wanted to, I could say I could do something like this. I'll call these ones SFX. And what you would normally do, actually, let's call this one something like guns, whatever, or like you would actually, the way I would set the session up here is I would set this up as a parent per sound effect. So if I wanted to create something like this is, so now this is a parent of this one right here, that this is like a folder track. So basically now this is these are all going straight out to the master bus, but this still allows us to control this and fold it and hide it and work with it. Basically, I would use this as like a sound effect. So if I had another one, if I had another sound effect, let's drop that one out here. And we'll call this one whatever. So I would create footsteps right here. Let's do a couple of the Control T. Is that what it is? Sweet. So if I did footsteps there, and if I did something like So I could basically start to build this thing out. And depending on the complexity of your project, you may set up multiple projects for multiple different things. Maybe you have like a game that has a lot of like mechanical, like mechanized sounds. Maybe you're working on like with cars, like a car game or something like that, or maybe like a mech game where you're going to have a lot of robots and stuff. And so basically you may have something like a different session for all the mech sounds and then a different session for all the sound effect sounds or like footsteps. But for a small game, you can do everything in one giant session here. And so that's what we're going to look at for right now. Let's get back over to Matrix. Let's get some sound effects in here. So let's just pull some stuff in. I'm just going to pull in some random stuff. I'm going to use for the sound effects libraries. This is the Sonus one. This is the one that the GDC one that you should have. If you've not downloaded this, you should download this. It's 30 gigs of sound effects. So let's just grab in some sci-fi audio samples. All right, that sounds pretty cool. So I'm not calling them gun. We'll call this sci-fi now. Let's just drag in a few of these sounds here. So I can see them. Come on. Let's do this one here. Here. And space horn. Cool. So you're not going to be able to hear these things. I accidentally hit something last night or today with my stupid tempo markers, and I don't know how to get rid of those things. I don't think it's warping them. I think these are just tempo markers that it's trying to extract tempo out of this for music. It's just bars and beats. Let's turn minutes and seconds. And I don't know how to get rid of that stupid thing. It's under visuals somewhere. I don't know. I must have accidentally hit some shortcut key. I hate that when you're working on a new. Let's see if I can find it. Docker transport. Some preferences I goofed somewhere. It doesn't really matter. It's just annoying. Okay, so you're not going to be able to hear these. Well, let's try this. I could maybe make it so you can hear them. Where is my preferences here? There it is. So I'll switch over to Wasapi. Cool. I think you should be able to hear these now. Can you hear that? Nope. Bummer. Okay. I might not be able to make it. So you might not be able to hear these, but that's okay. If you can't, that's all right. Go back to ASIO. Let's try. No. Well, maybe we can go to Zoom. Nope. All right. Well, I'm just going to have to go here. You're not going to be able to hear these sounds. That's okay. So what I'm going to do here is in this, I'm going to create basically a bank of sounds in here. And so what we want to do is we want to create basically these, and maybe it would be that, where's my other folder? I'm going to make a more complex sound. So explosion warped. So I'll throw explosion warped, and I want that to be part of this sound effect here. So I'd stack these two together to create kind of like a single sound effect out of these two and edit these things down and do the same thing here. Cool. Maybe I'll trim this up a bit and let's see what that sounds like. It's actually pretty cool. I know you can't hear it, but oh, that's badass. That one's lame. So I'm gonna save this thing, and basically now what we want to do is we want to start to be able to connect this to. Well, we want to export these sounds. So I'll spend a couple minutes here, and this is just a Reaper function. Basically, one of the cool things about Reaper and also with Nuendo is that when you start setting up these very complex sessions, the way you export them is crucial because you want to maintain the naming structure through the entire process. So to set this thing up, so if I were to bounce this thing down right now, like I don't have any markers set up, so it wouldn't actually bounce. So if I go under, what is it, render, there, like if I wanted to send this thing out to render, it says the master mix right here. It's mixed the entire project. And basically that would go through in a linear fashion as we would with a normal DAW and just export the master track there. That's not what we want to have happen. We want to export each of these individually from one another. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I need to create some regions with these things. So if I go through, let's draw here. So I can draw my in and out points right here. And that's my selection, I guess my region selector. What I'm going to do is here, and there must be a shortcut for this, but I can't find it yet. It says set selection to items. It doesn't have a shortcut. So I could create a key command, which I would really like to do. So from like with Nuendo, it's P is the key command for this. Actually, maybe I can do that. No, I don't have time. But basically, under here, I'm going to say, under the timeline, I say, wait, what do I have selected right now? Just this one selected. I'm going to say set time selections. And now I want to turn this into a region. So I'm going to say create region from selection, which is Shift R. So I'm going to say Shift R. And I'm going to do the same thing with each of these right here. So I have to do up here, selection items, Shift R. And then I'm going to grab both of these ones right here and say select items. To items, it's going to use those. I'm going to say Shift R. And we can see it created regions above here. Those regions are now what are going to allow us to choose what gets rendered out. And I think can I change the name on them here? I can't do it here, but I can, I think I can do it from my view, my region manager. It's like a region marker manager here. So if I wanted to change the name of this thing, I call this one I'll just call that one alien. Call this one breath. So it changes the name up here. Or breath or breathe. That's fine. Breathe is fine. We'll call this one space horn. You don't have to name these. This is just so that it just helps me keep track of what's going on up here. Or maybe these are just three different versions of a sound. So now we want to export these things. This is where things get really cool. So if I want to render these things, so you go through and you get your mix, you get your plugins, you get everything all set up. Well, you can create much, much, much more sophisticated sessions than this, where you're doing sub-routing and buses. And basically, if I were to route to a bus and combine and do some sub-mixing, that's cool. I'm gonna keep this a little bit simpler. So under this, I'm gonna go render. And instead of rendering the master matrix right here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna render the region render matrix. So right now, there's no regions selected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up this thing called the region manager, which is what we saw before, or the region matrix, which pulls up down here. Now, this is where things I think are really pretty fascinating. What this is going to allow us to do, you can also just have it open down here, the region render. What I want to say is that this region, this alien region right here, it contains this sound, which is on crash. So I want crash to be rendered on that one. I want under breathe, I want that to come under boom, and under bang, I want it to be both. Did I not get that in the? Oh, I didn't get explosion warped inside of here. Now it shows up there. So these are basically inside of here. And so I want these to show up both as this one here. So I could also just check this one, which would be the parent bus of this thing right here. So basically I could listen to just the parent bus. But right now this alien is going to listen to just the alien track. Or the crash is going to listen to just the alien track. Boom is going to listen to just this breathe track right here. And then bang, well, this region here, space horn, is going to have bang and explosion warped on it. So it's a way to, this matrix right here is badass. It really allows you to customize your export and your routing. And once you get the hang of it, it's awesome what you can do with this region matrix right here. So I guess I could just go to render from here, which is the same page. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to render this to, basically I want to have this thing go to a directory. So I'm going to call this one, actually, let me get out of cancel. I'm going to go to file preferences or project settings right here. It says, where do I want to export to? Actually, I can let's just render it. So the directory, I'm going to call this one renders or rendered, either way. We used to call them renders, but I can call this one rendered. That's fine. The file name is Boom Reaper. But what I want to do is that if I were to just hit go, well, actually, just hit, let's set this up. I'm going to do my region render matrix. So it's got 3 regions set up right now. It's these three regions that it's going to export right now. If I wanted to, I could just turn those off and it won't render those out, and that's fine. But I want to go at 48K. And I'm going to let these be, let's go with those mono for right now. Nah, yeah, let's go mono. Full speed offline. And if I just hit go and apply, let's go back and see where it did the, get out of the way. Boom Reaper. So it's got my rendered files right here. And so it's called Boom Reaper 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's bad. That's not really going to help us because if I were to start using these in my DAW, that's not very indicative of what those sounds are. So let's delete these and go back and re-render this in a way that actually makes sense. So if I go to my render, instead, what I want to do is I want these renders to be named what the regions are up here. It can be what the regions are or what the track names are. So I'm going to go under the wildcards here and I'm going to delete this. And the wildcards allow you to add dynamic naming in there. So project information right here. So I could do it as either the track or the region right here. So I'm probably going to go with this as the region. And actually, let's try track first. So if I go by track, it's going to go by this name right here. If I go by region, it's going to go by this name up here. So let's go by track first and go ahead and just set this up. So render 4 files. And now it has bang, boom, crash, explosion, warped, which is massive. It's really, really useful to have that ability to highly define the names. So basically your track names here will be the event names in FMOD. That's clutch. So also if I wanted to, I could also have it named by the region right there. So that one's by that's one. Let's go back to this one and let's try rendering it by, instead of by track, let's render it by, and actually you can say by, we could do by region and track as well. Track, and then let's add region right there. So let's do project information, region. So render 4 files, and we'll see that it's going to do the same thing. So basically it says, oh, I should have put a space or an underscore there. So I'd probably want to do something like underscore. Let's get rid of these for a minute. Cool. So we can see that this is basically, this is called bang underscore space horn. And so we could so I should have actually put the track first. So space horn, bang, space horn, explosion. We can worry about that, the actual way of doing this later, but that's good enough for what we're trying to do right now. So basically, I know this is a fast demo on this, but the ability to actually export the names and set them in a way that you can export 500 different sounds with one button that are all named exactly correctly every single time. So once you spend the time getting this thing set up, it saves you, I can't tell you how many hundreds of hours this would probably save on a large game where you're trying to keep the chain of custody or keep the naming consistent through the entire process. This is so huge that you have the ability to do this. This is something that you can do with Nuendo, but I've not seen any other DAW that you can do this with. So it's really annoying when you have to go in and export every single individual sound effects like by markers. It takes forever and you have to rename them manually. That is just a serious waste of time. So, all right. So now let's go over to FMOD. So now we've got this set up here. If we go back over to FMOD and we pull this up, we'll see that as soon as I save, as soon as I save this thing, what it does is when I save that, it basically re-rendered everything in the background. And now over here in FMOD, we see that my linked session now has, oh, I didn't map it. Remember here? So I have to rendered assets path and I have to browse and it's under my rendered assets path here. So select folder, say yes, delete, that's fine. And now what shows up as that folder now shows up directly in here. This folder that my exports from my rendered folder shows up directly inside of FMOD. So every time I export or every time I hit Command or Control S on Reaper, this gets updated over here, which is cool. So now this is like, it's got a linked folder right here in my assets folder, and these actually act as just regular old assets. So under my events, if I create a new event, let's call this one a 3D event, and we'll call this one crash. Assign it to the master. And let me pull up is it Control 3? Yeah, Control 3 is my audio bed here. And we'll see that it has my Reaper session right here. And if I want to bring in crash, let's go over to the crash event, crash alien, drag that in, and we have my events here. And the cool thing is, if I go over and I'm like, and I could start tweaking it with the as I need it here. Maybe I want to pitch that thing down a little bit. Cool. That when I update it if I update and export out of Reaper, it propagates through the entire system and it updates inside my event right here. So I don't need to do anything, which again, that's a massive time saver. That it just takes away all this through. You don't have to re-import it, swap it out, change it. It just works. So it's pretty freaking clever and pretty sophisticated. So I'm pretty stoked on this concept right here. The same thing happens with Nuendo and Wise, but I like that this one is just essentially free. It works so stinking well. So yeah, so then, and of course you can have your regular assets. So right, these are showing that they're unused. You can have your regular assets in here as well. So if you bring in stuff that's like pre-made effects from other libraries or something like that, you don't need to have it linked to Reaper right here. So essentially, that's all you have to do. I'm not going to go through Unity and implement it right now, just because I don't think I really have time. But we know how to use events within Unity at this point. It's basically just an event like launcher, and it just works. So pretty sweet. And of course, also if I had, so I just have a 3D event right here. So if I had like another track, let's add an audio track, and let's add a multi-instrument in here. Actually, let's get rid of this one for a second. Let's just add a bunch of sounds in here. Where's my control 3? Instead of, oops, sorry, control 3. If I wanted to add these 3 in here, that again, it will also update inside the event here, which is, oops, let's go return. So we have our shuffle happening right there. So every time this gets called, but it propagates all the way through. Because if you didn't have this linking capability and you changed, say you're like, oh, that explosion is it's the wrong sounding explosion and I need to replace that. You have to go through into your original DAW, replace it, create the sound effect that you like, export it, re-import it over here, remove it from your asset bin, especially if it's named something different. You have to remove it from your asset bin and then bring in the new one and then find every instance where that was actually done and swap it out, which if you're using it in multiple places can be a real pain in the butt. So anyway, that's, I know I'm kind of like hyping this up, but this is massive. This is such a cool feature that this works. So yeah, so that was basically how you set up, and they just basically act as events right there. So I would strongly recommend that you look at doing something like this with one of the reasons for using Reaper, because it's just amazing for this sort of stuff. I'm still super sucky at Reaper. I'm still getting kind of like, I don't know my key commands, so I'm all thumbs when I'm looking for something. But as I'm getting into it, I'm like, man, this piece of software is pretty badass. So the other thing we want to look at here is, instead of doing this on a clip basis, like essentially an event sound effects basis, what we can also do is import our entire timeline. So basically our event over here. So if we're working on a scene or a complex, yeah, we'll say a complex scene or an event where basically I want to set I want this to act kind of like my DAW. What I can do is I can mirror my entire timeline. I can import my entire Reaper session into my timeline over here. So to do this, I'm going to create a new save it. That's fine. I'm going to create a new FMOD session, and this one's going to be a little bit different, just because I don't want to mess that one up that I just created. I'm going to call this one FMOD event. So say I get this Reaper session set up here, and this is a very, very complex with lots of different moving parts, but I want to be able to tweak all of those, and I want to mirror this behavior over inside of Reaper, or inside of FMOD. I have the ability to do that. So to do that, if we look under our preferences again over here, we have this thing called DAW, and we can say install, like Reaper Timeline Exporter. I can say install to Reaper. So I hit this right here, and what it's going to do is it's going to install a script. And if we look over on Reaper, Reaper has these things called actions. These are scripts, basically. Show action list right here. These are like basically kind of like macros, but they're more sophisticated than macros. They can do, well, I guess you can kind of think of them like macros. But we have, so these actions are scripts, are macros right here. These scripts are right here are all sorts of like custom scripts. And you can go you can go online and people create custom scripts that do pretty sophisticated stuff. And if you're really into the game audio thing, you can, so whatever, set track solo for 41, MIDI to OSC only. So it's just like, there's some, oh, here's, and you can add shortcuts for these things. You can you can create your own essentially shortcuts and macros. So what we want to do is when I sit over here it's going to ask us, where do we want to install the script? So basically it does it by default. You don't need to change anything, but it's in Mac app data roaming Reaper scripts. Just say select folder for further information, blah. Okay, cool. So now put that script in that folder. You don't need to go look for it, but if you want to, you can go find that script there. And then now what we do is go over into Reaper here, and what we want to say is actions, show action list. And mine shows up right here, script fmod studio integration.eel. It doesn't actually, like, it doesn't show up there by default. You actually have to say new action, new custom action, or load rescript right there. When I say load rescript, it actually will automatically pull me into this folder right here. You just click on it and say open, and it puts it in the list right there for the first time. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this one. I'm going to say run. And it said, cool. I export it and say close. And if I close this thing out, what we can see is that over in my FMOD Reaper event right here, this is where's my Reaper session? Boom Reaper. If we look in here, it added this thing right here, FS Pro Meta right here. This is the script. This is the fancy pants stuff that it's adding under the hood. We don't really need to like do anything with it. It just note that it's there. So now what is happening is it allows me to import my entire event list from Reaper into my FMOD session here. So let's get back to FMOD. And what I'm going to do is do the same thing I did before. I'm going to go under my assets. I'm going to drag in my Boom Reaper session here. Link it, and I can do the assets path. It's rendered. Select folder. Yes, that's fine. Delete. Cool. And now instead of dragging events from this, because now I can see that the same thing that I had before, instead of dragging events in individually, sound effects as events, I'm going to go to not my event browser, but my media browser here. What I'm going to do is instead under my events here, let's create I can just drag I can drag this over as an event. And I can say, is it 2D or 3D? We'll say 3D event. And close this out. And voila. We have our entire session, just like it was laid out over in Reaper, is now over here. So let's try to see what happens if I change something over here. So I'm going to drag this one out a little bit. Whoops. Drag this one out. Hit Control S. Oh, duplicate. Control S this thing. Cool. And if we go over to Reaper, did not update it. Interesting. I don't know. This is still new to me. So it did not update over there. I wonder how I can get that to sync a little better. I wonder if there's like a sync button.
Is it that live update thing at the bottom?
No, that's when you're connecting it to the game actually itself. And so you can actually monitor the game. So live updates like the connection, like the internet connection, or not internet, but IP connection. So I don't know why that wasn't updating, but that's good. That's good point. So I'm trying to think. Maybe I have to, I don't know. I have to spend some more time with it, but that's strange. So maybe it's just an importer. Maybe it's not a synchronization because it doesn't show it as being linked. So when I look over here, it says .link. This one might not be linked, but I still think that's still, which is kind of a bummer, but it's still like what it allows you to do is instead of doing all your sound design in here, you can do all your sound design over here, knowing what it's going to look like inside a Reaper. So that basically you can create some fairly complex moves and processes and get everything set up here, and then knowing how that's going to sync up over here. I don't know that I would actually do this. this is a neat feature, but I think unless they got that synced, I don't know that I would actually do that. I think the having just this right here, the Reaper link, this one right here, and using these, because these do link and they do actually update. So when I change something over in Reaper, they propagate all the way through. And I think that is a really, really useful tool. So yeah, I mean, basically there's that's the extent of it right now as far as how the two are synced up with one another. And then we could go into Unity and see that propagate all the way through the entire chain, which again, I'm repeating myself, but that's that when you can sync all these up together, I think that's when we're really gonna have a lot of it's a time saver, because what we want to do is we want to be focusing on the creative stuff, not on the technical stuff. And when, as we've already noticed in this class, you get mired so far down in the technical stuff that it's hard to keep your eye on the prize of like, yeah, I want to make this sound cool, that you're like, oh, I've got so many little like nooks and crannies and buttons and connections and code that you have to do that it's difficult to keep your sanity when you're trying to like make cool footsteps or something like that. So but yeah, that's all I really wanted to talk about today. Just kind of show this like neat little trick that you can do with this, because this is pretty unique. This is a unique workflow that works with both FMOD and with yeah, FMOD and Reaper. So I would recommend that you take a look at Reaper. There's a lot more. When I was like kind of like learning how to do this, I was experimenting with this myself. I went to the web and just like looked around at different videos and stuff. And this one, there's not much on it because it's still kind of a new feature, but there's a lot of people that do demos on not the integration, but just Reaper for sound design for video games. It's pretty cool. So I would encourage you to spend some time with Reaper. I think I'm going to buy it and play with it over break quite a bit so I can get better at it, just because I think I need to learn my key commands, because it's a neat piece of software. So let me grab attendance. Cool. That's all. I guess we're gonna finish up for a little bit early today. So if you want to, like, I would say go dive over and watch those videos and jump into doing the Viking Village stuff. If you've not set up Viking Village, it's complicated. You've got to look like class 20, we're gonna have class 25 today. Class 23 has the information that you need on it. So just again, class 23, because if you're trying to get Viking Village set up, it can be, it's not that bad, but trying to do it on your own, if you've not seen how to do the fix, it's difficult to do on your own. But once you see how it's done, you're like, oh yeah, I can actually hammer through this pretty easy. So, and also as a reminder, so you have to use, you can use the most modern version of Unity and do those weird fixes to get Viking Village working, and then, but using 2.0 of FMOD. Don't use 2.0.1. That doesn't work. The FMOD integration does not work with that. So you have to use 2.0. So that's what I've been using all day today, is the 2.0 stuff. So yeah, I guess that's it. So I guess without further ado, have a killer weekend. I'll stick around if anybody has any questions, but yeah, I'll catch up with you guys on Monday. We'll jump into Unreal for a week. It's gonna be badass, and then we're hopping over to break after that. So cool. Have a killer weekend.
Sweet. So I was going through the videos and wasn't getting any sound in Unity. So was that because I was using the 2.01 FMOD, so it doesn't integrate? Is that what you just said?
So I'm sorry. So like you're going through the videos and you couldn't get it to work. Like you weren't getting any sound coming from Unity or from FMOD or from where?
From Unity. Once I had done all the events and then put them in, there was no sound coming out. I probably screwed up the banks or something, but
Could have been. I can't say just off the top of my head, but okay, let me think about that. What, like, but you weren't getting any errors in your console in Unity?
no.
Okay. Yeah, then maybe you, like things like, did you make sure that you had your looping on? Like, so like if you're talking about like the torch sounds, like you got to make sure you have torch the looping on, because otherwise it just plays it once and then it stops it, and then you run around, you're like, oh, I don't hear anything. So make absolute sure that you have looping on there, because if you're not seeing any errors, that doesn't mean, it means that there's things are looking pretty good. So did you, is that, I don't know, that's the first thing that comes to mind. Did you try looping?
I'm pretty sure I did that, but I should probably go
Okay.
check.
That's the only thing I can think of off the top of my head. What we can do is try that, and then hit me up if you're still having a problem. We can just jump on a Zoom and troubleshoot it together.
Okay, cool.
All right, cool.
Thanks.
Sweet. See ya.
Thanks, Jeff.
Cool. Thank you.
Hey, man. I'm kind of behind on a few things, but I just
Yeah, I was getting kind of caught up on my grading. I saw that I was gonna reach out. So yeah,
yeah.
wait, do this when you get submit in there, just well, I should, it'll show up for me, but basically because right now it shows that I basically graded it and there's a 0 there. So once you get it done, I'll go back and regrade it, but you just might have to remind me. So get a few of them in, and then go back and then I can regrade those.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm trying to go through and rewatch the vids. They're helping.
Cool.
I was kind of having like a lot going on recently, so yeah, I definitely want to like knock this out and get this crushed out before the end of the semester here. So, I do you have any office hours that I can maybe hit you up and like go through
Yeah,
some?
I mean,
Yeah.
like Tuesday, Thursdays from 2 to 3:15 is like my normal office hours. So, but I don't usually at the beginning of the semester, I just basically turned on my Zoom and just sat around here. But then I was like, people weren't actually showing up that much. So it's
Right.
like, just hit me up by either text and say, hey, can you hop on? And I'll hop on with you real quick or something like that. Anytime you want to just jump on.
Cool. Appreciate it, man.
Cool. I mean, I'll catch you later.
I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
So it's not too related to the class, but did you take a look at the Live 11 updates yet?
Yeah. So yeah, I've had the beta for a couple weeks. I got a little inside scoop on it.
I'm
So
so excited for comping. Oh my god.
I know, isn't it cool that it's really that was something that I think that's really been missing for a long time. And it's yeah, having essentially the playlist kind of thing that we do in Pro Tools and being able to loop and create comps, and the comping is really clever the way they did that. I think it's really really badass. I don't know. And
Guys, Pro Tools way of comping by allowing you to actually chop and throw sections of your multiple recordings into the main playlist, you know?
yeah, it's funny because these are things especially because I'm not a hardcore user. I experiment with it, but I don't perform. But and so a lot of the features that were coming out, I was like, yeah, those are cool. But I could see for some people that are like, man, this is the one thing I've been missing for a long time. And for the things that they added, those were not the things that really missed. The comping thing I think is really badass because to me, I mean, what Ableton lacks as a DAW is it's not meant to be like Pro Tools, right? It's not supposed to work like that. But there's a few things that I'm used to working in a traditional DAW that I miss when I'm working in Ableton, and those are some of those things right there. There are some other things I wish they would still add more. I wish they could do actual audio editing in there. You can't actually edit the audio. That's, to me, that's annoying. I was really hoping they would overcome that one, but all the other stuff is really cool. They did a lot of the generative stuff. It'll do the randomizer stuff. I think is really cool. You can do the randomizing between these states, and so it creates you can choose different sounds and velocities. I don't know, stuff to make it more if you get stuck in a rut, how it can get you out of a creative rut. It can choose different chord structures and different. I don't know. I think that's really cool. But
yeah, really excited for that comping, mostly just because I'm quite a resample savvy.
Yeah.
Since I write a lot of drum and bass, it's kind of just part of the actual formula of your workflow, you know?
Uh-huh.
So now I don't know, I just bought myself a hardware synth too.
Cool.
So as soon as
What'd you get?
I bought a Novation Peak.
Nice. I don't know that well. I think I've seen it, but is it pretty what kind of stuff does it sounds does it create?
So it's actually a digital hardware synth, which is interesting. I'm excited to play with that. But essentially, you get some modeled analog waveforms. The usual ones comes in most analogs. But then it actually gives you wavetables.
Cool.
Really to what Serum might do.
Yeah.
And it comes with a software too, and you can edit these wavetables and then load them onto the synth.
Rad.
And I think it does 8 voices total.
Cool.
Not bad at all, and it's got a really unique matrix, so you're able to do some pretty interesting routing options for it. I'm really excited for it.
Cool.
Great.
I love it just because it breaks you out of the, I don't know, just it gives you something that's uniquely you, and not that like Serum isn't like you can't make it because of the wave tables and all that stuff. You can make it uniquely yours, but I don't know, when you start to create like I like what I like about hardware is you start to like dig in on that, and it gives you a sound like as an artist that people can start to attach to you. And when you have hardware, you kind of like gravitate, you work around in different sounds within that instrument, but they still have that same kind of like timbre or that same vibe. And so when you listen to like, I don't know, some big famous classic artists, they have this kind of like timbre that's with them. And I think as an artist, it allows you to separate yourself from the pack and also create like kind of like a unique something that a unique sound, which I don't know, I think it's really cool.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, being able to like record. I don't know. How long do the comping sessions allow you to record for?
I don't know. I haven't seen that. I haven't like I'm imagining, and I don't think there is a limit. I mean, there's a limit, but not that I would think there's any common limit.
Yeah, but it's just gonna be nice to be able to like, I don't know, just make a bunch of bass sounds and save like that giant mud pie, you know?
Yeah,
You can just drag in the various sections later, and instead of having to chop a bunch of clips, now I can just take one playlist, kind of scrub through it, find something I like, and then just cut that section and move to the next playlist. It's gonna make resampling and then arranging just so much quicker.
that's cool. That's cool to see how, yeah, how yeah, like how, like that, because I didn't even think about it as a resampling kind of thing. That's pretty neat. So I think I like to see how other people work, and that's what I love about Ableton, how everybody uses it like a little bit differently. Like they all have their kind of workflow, which is cool.
Hmm.
So yeah, well, sweet dude. Yeah, well, like they have the public beta coming out pretty soon, and so it should be out. Oh, it's already out, but like you have to apply to get into it. But because they said I think it's gonna come out like early 2021, so a couple months.
Yeah,
But
probably like late February, March. That's usually when they release the new ones. So
okay, yeah, it's funny because to me it feels like 10 just came out, but
yeah,
it's like I was like, but it's been like 2 years, so I didn't realize that.
definitively, it really did. I think
Yeah.
it's for 2.5 years, whereas the other ones were about 4 or 5. So
That's crazy compared to like, look at the like iPhone. It seems like they could put out like two a year at this point. Like it's like so that's crazy that that's such a long cycle, but good. I mean, that's cool.
part of the issue too, though, was that the hardware for computers have just been developing so fast too.
Yeah.
They had to kind of scrub the engine and rework it a bit for modern hardware. So
Yeah. Well, when they made from 9 to 10, like they upped the frame rate and they upped like the resolution of everything. And so like, and it's funny because like I didn't like when I was looking from the 9 to 10, I was like, they're adding like what wavetable and adding like the echo thingy and a couple other things. That I was like, it doesn't seem like all that cool. But then I learned later. Well, first off, I love those effects and synth, and then also things like colorizing your like throwing favorites with colors and stuff like that. You're like, oh, and I didn't even realize at the time how important that was. And then looking back, you're like, man, sucks going back to 9 when I have to deal with all this other kind of BS. And so all the same thing with this 11, going to 11, and you're like, all these things, I'm like, yeah, they seem okay, but then I'll probably get addicted to them as I get better at it.
guess that's the problem with changing your workflow too, though, is you
Yeah.
get that new one you make.
Yeah, totally.
I can't go back to my old ways.
Yeah, totally, man. Well, cool. Yeah, well, I gotta roll because I'm gonna go test drive a car here, so I gotta boogie out of here. But yeah, let's keep the conversation going. I'd love to see what you see when you start. Like, see if you can get into that beta, and then we'll see. Like, let's discuss.
Totally, yeah. Maybe I'll just save a video and show you kind of like how I decided to make some workflows. So
Cool. I like it. Sweet, man.
thank you.
All right, I'll catch you later.